The Galactic Concordance Council met in the great amphitheater of Xylos Prime, a place built to show off unity among the stars. Tall spires of polished stone rose around the circular chamber, and the air hummed softly with translation fields that turned every language into something everyone could understand. Over 200 species filled the tiered seats, some with scales, some with feathers, some made of light or crystal, but all of them powerful, ancient, or both. At the very edge of the lowest tier, near the back where the light barely reached, sat the human delegation. Only 2 humans were present, Daniel Shaw and Lisa Monroe. They wore plain gray uniforms with no badges, no medals, no bright colors to draw attention. Their chairs were smaller than the others, placed slightly lower as if to remind everyone that humans were newcomers, barely more than guests. Daniel kept his hands folded in his lap, his dark eyes watching the crowd without blinking. Lisa sat beside him, her posture straight but relaxed, her gaze steady on the central podium where the speakers stood. Councillor Verlac of the Ketheri Dominion rose to speak. His body was tall and segmented, covered in thick iridescent plates that clicked softly as he moved. His voice, amplified by the chamber's acoustics, rolled out like thunder. "Honored members of the Concordance," he began. "Today we address yet another request from a species still learning the rules of civilized space." He paused, letting the words sink in, then turned slowly toward the human seats, the humans. A ripple of sound passed through the chamber, murmurs, snorts, even a few outright laughs. The Xenthar, reptilian and broad-shouldered, let out a deep chuckle. The Miri, bird-like and perched high above, trilled in amusement. Even the Orlans, whose bodies shimmered like living glass, emitted a soft harmonic hum that meant they found something ridiculous. Verlac continued, his tone dripping with mockery. "They ask for expanded trade rights. They ask for a permanent seat on the Security Oversight Committee. They ask as if they have earned it, as if their handful of colonies and their single-system navy make them equals among us." He spread his clawed hands wide. "Tell me, friends, when did crawling become the same as walking?" More laughter followed, louder this time. Some delegates turned fully toward the humans, pointing or shaking their heads. A few recorded the moment with small hovering devices, no doubt to share the spectacle back home. It was clear to everyone in the room. Humans were not taken seriously. They were a curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst. Daniel did not react. He had heard this before in smaller meetings, in whispered conversations in corridors, in the way other species avoided eye contact when humans entered a room. He knew they saw Earth as a backwater planet that had only recently cracked the code of faster-than-light travel. They saw human history as violent and chaotic, full of wars and mistakes. They did not see the long nights spent rebuilding after disasters, the quiet courage of explorers who flew into the unknown with nothing but hope and math, or the stubborn kindness that kept humans helping each other even when the universe seemed determined to crush them. Lisa shifted slightly in her seat. Her fingers brushed the small comm unit on her wrist, but she did not activate it. She knew better than to respond. Words would only feed the mockery. Silence, she had learned, was often the strongest reply. Verlac stepped down from the podium, satisfied. The next speaker, a Miri diplomat named Kess, took his place. She spoke quickly about resource allocation in the outer sectors, but her eyes kept flicking toward the humans, as if checking to see if they were still there. They always were. Humans showed up. They listened. They filed reports. They never missed a meeting, even when they knew they would be ignored. After the session ended, most delegates rose and left in groups, chatting and laughing. The humans waited until the chamber was nearly empty before standing. Daniel adjusted his collar, not out of nervousness but habit. Lisa glanced at him and gave a small nod. No words passed between them. None were needed. Outside the amphitheater, the twin suns of Xylos Prime cast long shadows across the plaza. Alien vehicles hummed past on silent repulsors. Vendors sold food and trinkets in a dozen languages. A group of young Xenthar cadets walked by, their armor still shiny from academy polish. One of them pointed at Daniel and whispered something to his friend. They both laughed. Daniel kept walking. Lisa matched his pace. Back at the human diplomatic quarters, a modest suite in a nondescript building on the edge of the city, they finally spoke. "They think we're harmless," Lisa said, dropping into a chair by the window. "That we'll keep asking, keep begging until they throw us a scrap." Daniel poured 2 cups of water from a dispenser. He handed one to her. "Maybe they're right," he said quietly. "Maybe we are harmless." Lisa looked at him, surprised. "You don't mean that." "I mean we don't play their game," he replied. "We don't bribe. We don't threaten. We don't form secret alliances. We just show up, and that confuses them." She took a sip of water. "It also makes them think we're weak." "Let them think that," Daniel said. He walked to the window and looked out at the city lights beginning to glow in the twilight. "Weakness is what they expect. It's what they understand. But it's not what we are." Lisa was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "The signal went out this morning." Daniel nodded. "All stations confirmed. Phase 1 is complete. Do you think they'll notice?" "Not yet," he said. "They're too busy laughing." In the days that followed, nothing changed on the surface. Human freighters still delivered medical supplies to the Miri colonies. Human engineers still helped maintain the Concordance's long-range comms network. Human scientists still shared data on stellar anomalies. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Quiet orders had been sent. Hidden protocols activated. Every human outpost, every ship, every citizen had received the same message: prepare to leave. No one on the council noticed. Why would they? Humans were still there, still working, still polite. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't make demands. They simply did their jobs better than most and asked for nothing in return. And so the council kept laughing. They laughed at human simplicity. They laughed at human patience. They laughed at the idea that such a young, messy species could ever matter in the grand design of the galaxy. They did not see the quiet strength in that patience. They did not understand that silence could be a choice, not a surrender. And they certainly did not imagine that one day soon the humans would stop showing up altogether. But that day was coming. And when it arrived, there would be no warning, no speech, no dramatic exit, just absence. And in the vast, echoing halls of the Concordance, that absence would speak louder than any words ever could. At first, no one noticed anything unusual. Human freighters still glided along the trade lanes, their hulls marked with the simple blue and white insignia of Earth's Interstellar Logistics Corps. Human engineers still showed up for their shifts at the Concordance relay stations, tools in hand, ready to fix whatever broke. Human diplomats still attended every scheduled meeting, sitting quietly in their usual seats, saying little, listening carefully. Everything seemed normal. But then, slowly, the humans began to vanish. It started with small things. A medical supply ship bound for the Miri homeworld never arrived. Not because it was destroyed or delayed. Its last signal showed it entering Miri space right on schedule. But because it simply powered down its engines, shut off its transponder, and drifted silently into a stable orbit around a barren moon. When Miri scouts boarded it, they found the vessel spotless, fully stocked, and completely empty. No crew, no signs of struggle, just cold corridors and blinking control panels waiting for hands that would never return. A week later, the human research outpost on Kepler 186F went dark. The Concordance sent a message, no reply. They dispatched a quarantine inspection team. The station's doors opened automatically. Inside, every workstation was tidy. Meals sat uneaten in the mess hall, still sealed in their containers. Personal logs ended mid-sentence. It was as if the entire staff had stood up at once and walked out. Except there were no footprints, no shuttle launches, no escape pods missing. Counselor Vierlach heard the reports and scoffed. "Drama," he declared during a private briefing with his aides. "They want attention. They think if they disappear for a few cycles, we'll beg them to come back." He ordered the Cathari fleet to monitor human activity more closely, not out of concern, but to catch them in what he assumed was a bluff. But the disappearances kept happening. A human mining colony near the Orion Spur powered down its reactors and sealed its surface hatches. Scans showed no life signs inside. Yet the air recyclers still ran. The lights still glowed softly behind reinforced viewports. A fleet of human cargo haulers en route to the Zenthar border suddenly cut communications and veered off course, vanishing into the Kuiper belt of a dead star system. When Zenthar warships gave chase, they found only empty ships circling a frozen dwarf planet. Their docking bays open to the void. Still, the Council refused to panic. They told themselves it was a coordinated protest. A performance. Humans were emotional, after all, everyone knew that. They must be upset about the trade vote. They'd return once they felt heard. Then Earth went silent. Not with explosions. Not with the final broadcast. Not even with a farewell message. One moment Sol system was humming with activity. Ships coming and going, satellites beaming data, cities glowing under night skies. The next, every human-made signal stopped. Every station, every colony, every ship within 50 light-years of Earth fell into perfect, eerie quiet. The Miri sent their fastest scout vessel. It arrived in 3 days. The pilot, a young Miri named Telly, circled Mars first. The orbital shipyards hung in space like skeletons, massive frameworks of steel and composite, half-built hulls suspended in zero gravity, tools still floating near workstations. No one answered hails. No defense grid activated. Telly landed a probe on Earth itself. It rolled through empty streets of what had been New York, past silent cars and dark skyscrapers. Birds flew overhead. Trees swayed in the wind. But no voices. No footsteps. No laughter. Telly's report shook the concordance. "They're gone," she said, her voice trembling over the comms. "All of them, not dead. Not hiding, just gone." Fierlek refused to believe it. He demanded proof. He accused the Miri of exaggerating. He claimed humans were hiding underground, waiting to emerge with demands. But as more scouts returned with the same story, empty homes, untouched food, running machines with no operators, even his certainty began to crack. The real trouble started when the systems humans maintained began to fail. The long-range comms network, which relied on human-designed quantum repeaters, started dropping signals. Without regular updates from human engineers, the translation matrices in concordance hubs began glitching, misrendering words, causing diplomatic incidents. Medical shipments stalled because human biostabilizers, used in nearly every hospital across known space, were no longer being produced. Factories that depended on human-sourced nanofilters slowed to a crawl. Worse, the entertainment feeds went dark. Human storytelling algorithms had been woven into the cultural fabric of dozens of species. Miri children grew restless without their nightly holodramas. Xanthar warriors missed their tactical simulations, which used human pattern recognition software to generate realistic battle scenarios. Even the Orlans, who rarely engaged with organic media, admitted their meditation harmonics felt off, without the subtle human-composed background tones. The council held emergency sessions. Accusations flew. The Quarren suggested humanity had been taken by a hidden enemy. The Xanthar whispered about a plague. The Miri feared a mass suicide, but no evidence supported any of these theories. There were no bodies, no wreckage, no distress calls, just absence. And then came the data burst. It arrived without warning, transmitted from deep space near the Helios Drift, a region long considered too unstable for navigation. The signal was clean, strong, and encoded in every known language. Concordance analysts decoded it within hours. Inside were technical schematics for advanced energy converters, linguistic archives of every human language ever spoken, and medical formulas for diseases the concordance didn't even know existed. At the end of the file, in plain text, was a single line. "We are not gone. We are becoming." No signature, no explanation. Just those words. Verlak stared at the message on his private screen for a long time. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar, doubt. Had they misjudged humans? Had their laughter blinded them to something greater? But it was too late for apologies. The humans were already gone, and they hadn't left in anger or fear. They'd left without a word, as if the concordance's opinion no longer mattered. In the empty human quarters on Xylos Prime, the lights still turned on when motion was detected. The water dispenser still worked. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the table, long cold. The door chimed softly as if expecting someone to return. No one did. The silence grew heavier each day, not just in the halls of the council but across the entire galaxy. Species that had never questioned their place in the cosmic order now found themselves wondering, what if the ones they mocked were the ones who truly understood the future? And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, far from the laughter and the politics and the petty hierarchies, something new was stirring. Something quiet, something vast. But for now, all the concordance had was silence, and for the first time they realized how loud it could be. The data burst changed everything. It sat in the Concordance's central archives like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through every level of galactic society. At first, most species treated it as a curiosity, a final message from a vanished people. But as engineers and scientists began testing the schematics it contained, they realized the truth. This was not a farewell. It was a gift, and it was far beyond anything the Concordance could produce. The energy converter designs alone could power a city for a century on a single gram of hydrogen. The medical formulas cured genetic decay in Orleans, a condition their own doctors had declared irreversible. The linguistic models helped the Zenthar finally decode ancient texts from their pre-spaceflight era. Every species found something in the data that spoke directly to their deepest needs. And yet there was no demand attached, no price, no plea for recognition, just knowledge offered freely. Counselor Virlac grew uneasy. He had spent cycles dismissing humans as primitive, yet here was proof they had been quietly advancing, while the rest of the galaxy rested on its laurels. He ordered his aides to trace the signal's origin. It came from the Helios Drift, a swirling nebula of ionized gas and gravitational tides that had wrecked every probe sent into it for the last 300 years. Navigation there was considered impossible. Yet the humans had not only entered it, they had sent a clear, stable transmission from its heart. The Concordance debated what to do. Some argued they should ignore it. Others wanted to send a war fleet, just in case the humans were planning something hostile. But the Quarren elder Majar, who rarely spoke in full sessions, stood before the council and said only this: "They left without anger. They gave without asking. If we respond with fear, we prove we never deserved their presence." His words carried weight. In the end, a joint expedition was approved, not military but scientific and diplomatic. Ships from 5 major species would go together: a Miri scout vessel for speed, a Zenthar heavy cruiser for protection, a Quarren observation barge for analysis, an Orlan resonance pod for communication, and a small Cathari science frigate commanded by Verlac's own protege, Corin. The journey took 6 weeks. As they neared the Helios Drift, their instruments began to fail. Gravity readings spiked and dropped without pattern. Light bent in strange ways. Time itself seemed to stretch and compress. The Miri pilot, Telly, the same one who had visited Earth, guided them using old human navigation logs found in the data burst. To everyone's surprise, the logs worked perfectly. The chaotic currents parted like a curtain when they followed the human coordinates exactly. Then they saw it. At the center of the nebula, where physics said nothing stable could exist, floated a structure unlike anything in known history. It was not built, it had grown. Smooth curves of silver-blue material spiraled outward like a galaxy made solid, pulsing with a soft inner light. Thousands of human ships orbited it, not as separate vessels, but as if they were cells in a living body. Some were freighters, some were warships, some were tiny shuttles. All moved in perfect harmony, weaving through the structure's arms without collision, without command. The expedition held position, stunned into silence. No weapons were raised, no hails were sent. They simply watched. Then a figure emerged from the structure. It was not a ship. It was not a robot. It looked human, but not quite. Its form shimmered, shifting between solid and light as if made of thought-given shape. It glided toward the Cathari frigate, stopping just outside the viewport. Inside the bridge, Corin froze. He recognized the face. It was Daniel Shaw, but Shaw did not wear a uniform. He did not speak through a comm. Instead, his voice entered their minds directly, calm and clear, translated instantly into each listener's native tongue. "You came," he said. "That is good." Corin found his voice. What are you?" "We are what humans chose to become," Shaw replied. "You called us young. You called us loud. You called us messy. And you were right. We were all those things. But we were also learning. While you perfected your old ways, we asked new questions. While you built walls between species, we built bridges, even when you tore them down." He gestured behind him toward the glowing structure. "This is not a weapon. It is a home, a mind, a promise. We merged our consciousness with quantum fields, with starlight, with the silence between atoms. We did not die. We stepped forward." Telly, watching from her scout ship, whispered, "Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed us?" Shaw asked gently. "Would the council have allowed it? Or would they have called it heresy or madness or a threat? You laughed when we asked for a seat. How would you have reacted if we said we no longer needed chairs? No one answered. They all knew the truth, Shaw continued. We did not leave because you hurt us. We left because you could not see us, and we could not wait forever to be seen. Then Lisa Monroe appeared beside him, her form just as luminous, just as calm. She looked at the Miri ship and smiled. Tell your children the stories we left behind, she said. Not as myths, but as maps. The expedition stayed for 3 days. During that time, the humans, now something more, shared more knowledge. Not just technology, but philosophy. They spoke of unity without control, of progress without conquest, of strength found in letting go. The Quarren recorded everything. The Orlans resonated with the new ideas. Even Corin, trained to distrust anything unfamiliar, felt something shift inside him. When it was time to leave, Shaw gave them one final message. We are not your enemies. We are not your saviors. We are simply elsewhere. But if you ever choose to grow beyond your old fears, you will know where to find us. The expedition turned and flew back toward known space. As they crossed the edge of the drift, the structure vanished from their sensors as if it had never been there. Back on Xylos Prime, the council gathered again. This time, there were no jokes, no sneers. Farlak sat in silence, staring at the floor. The reports from the expedition spread like fire. Species that had mocked humans now studied their archives with reverence. Schools began teaching human history, not as a cautionary tale, but as a path. And in the quiet moments when the stars shone bright and the comms were still, many wondered if the humans had not abandoned the galaxy, but had instead shown it a door they had not been ready to walk through. But maybe, just maybe, they could learn. The return of the expedition changed the concordance in ways no one expected. It was not sudden. It did not come with laws or declarations. It began quietly, like a seed cracking open in the dark. Species that had once rolled their eyes at human ideas now studied them with care. Young Miri scholars pored over human poetry, finding in its raw emotion a truth their own formal verses had lost. Xanthar engineers rebuilt their power grids using human schematics, marveling at how simple the solutions were. Elegant, efficient, kind to the worlds they touched. Even the Cathari, proud and rigid, began to shift. Corin, once a loyal follower of Verlac's hardline views, requested permission to open a human studies archive in the capital. He argued that understanding what humans had become might help the concordance avoid the same fate. Stagnation disguised as order. To everyone's surprise, Verlac did not deny him. He simply nodded and walked away, his usual bluster gone. The real test came when the concordance faced its first major crisis without human support. A solar flare from a nearby star threatened to fry the comms network across 3 sectors. In the past, human engineers would have deployed shield drones within hours. Now there was no one. Panic spread. But then a young Orlan technician, who had spent nights studying the human data burst, proposed a fix using harmonic dampeners tuned to human frequency patterns. It worked. The network held. And for the first time, a non-human species had not just used human knowledge, they had built on it. This small victory sparked something new. Collaboration. Species that had guarded their secrets for centuries began sharing openly. The Quarren offered their deep-time archives. The Miri shared their atmospheric modeling. The Xanthar opened their shipyards to joint projects. It was messy. It was slow. But it was real. Meanwhile, far beyond the drift, the luminous structure continued to grow. Scouts sent to the edge of the nebula reported strange readings, pulses of coherent thought, bursts of light that formed shapes resembling human faces, then dissolved. No one tried to enter again. They had been shown enough. The humans were not hiding. They were evolving, and they had made it clear they would not be pulled back into old games of power and pride. Back on Xylos Prime, the council chambers felt different. The air was heavier, not with tension, but with reflection. Delegates spoke more slowly. They listened more. When a young representative from a minor waterworld species asked for aid after a climate collapse, no one laughed. No one called them unprepared. Instead, a team formed within the hour. Miri hydrologists, Xanthar terraformers, even a Cathari logistics officer who quietly rerouted emergency supplies. Irlak watched it all from the shadows. He no longer sat at the front. He had stepped down from his leadership role, citing personal reflection. In truth, he spent his days in the New Human Archive reading old Earth history. He learned about wars humans had fought, not just against others, but against their own worst instincts. He read about how they had nearly destroyed their planet, then turned back from the edge. He saw how they had reached for the stars not to conquer, but to connect. One evening, he found Corin in the archive, holding a data chip labeled Project Horizon Final Logs. They knew, Corin said without looking up. They knew we wouldn't understand, so they didn't waste time explaining. They just left. Verlac stood beside him. Do you think they'll ever come back? Corin shook his head. I don't think they left to be missed. I think they left to be remembered differently. The Concordance began to change its rules. The Security Oversight Committee, once reserved for species with large fleets and ancient bloodlines, now included representatives from younger civilizations, those willing to listen, to adapt, to admit they didn't have all the answers. Trade agreements were rewritten to favor sustainability over profit. Education programs emphasized empathy alongside engineering. It was not perfect. Old habits died hard. Some still whispered that humans had abandoned their duty, but those voices grew quieter with each passing cycle. Then came the day when a child, a Miri hatchling visiting the capital with her school group, asked a question during a public forum. If humans were so wise, she chirped, why didn't they stay and teach us? The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to Majar, the Quarren elder, who had become the unofficial keeper of the human legacy. He rose slowly, his crystalline form catching the light. Because, he said, some lessons cannot be taught. They must be felt. And sometimes the deepest lesson is the sound of silence after someone you took for granted is gone. The child tilted her head, thinking. Then she nodded as if she understood. In the months that followed, a new tradition began. On the anniversary of the day human signals went dark, every species in the Concordance observed a moment of quiet. No comms, no broadcasts, just stillness. At first it felt awkward, but soon it became sacred. In that silence, they remembered not just what humans had given them, but what they had failed to see while humans were still there. And in that remembering, they began to grow. Far away, in the heart of the Helios drift, the structure pulsed gently as if sensing the shift. It did not reach out. It did not speak. It simply existed, bright, calm, and whole. The humans were not waiting for an apology. They were not watching for redemption. They had moved beyond that. But in their absence, they had given the galaxy something rare, a second chance, and for the first time in centuries, the Concordance chose to take it. Years passed. The silence that followed humanity's departure never faded. It deepened. It became part of the rhythm of the Concordance, like the slow pulse of a star or the turning of seasons on a living world. New generations grew up knowing humans only through archives, stories, and the quiet moment of stillness observed every cycle. To them, humans were not a laughing matter. They were a lesson wrapped in mystery, a mirror held up to the galaxy's pride. The changes that began after the expedition to the Helios drift did not stop. They spread. Schools taught not just how to build, but why to build with care. Diplomats learned to listen before speaking. Even the Cathari, once the loudest voices of hierarchy and control, now sent young delegates who asked questions instead of making demands. Varlac, long retired, lived in a small dwelling on the edge of Xylos Prime's capital, tending a garden of earth plants grown from seeds found in an old human cargo pod. He never spoke in public, but sometimes young students would find him there, and he would tell them about the day the council laughed, and how that laughter had cost them more than they ever knew. The Concordance itself had changed. It was no longer a council of the powerful, but a gathering of the willing. Species joined not by proving their strength, but by showing their readiness to learn. The old amphitheater where humans had once sat in silence was preserved exactly as it was. Chairs untouched, translation fields still humming softly, as if waiting for two people in gray uniforms to return. No one sat in those seats. They were left empty on purpose, a reminder that presence is not measured by noise but by impact. Out in the galaxy, human technology continued to serve, not as a crutch, but as a foundation. The energy converters powered hospitals on icy moons. The medical formulas saved entire bloodlines from genetic decay. The navigation logs opened safe paths through regions once thought deadly. And every time a species used one of these gifts, they did so with respect, never taking it for granted again. No one tried to contact the Helios drift. They had been shown the door, and they understood it was not theirs to walk through yet. But they watched, and sometimes in the deepest quiet of space, their long-range sensors would catch a flicker, a pulse of coherent light, a whisper of structured thought, drifting from the nebula like a breath. They did not analyze it. They simply noted it, logged it, and let it be. Some things were not meant to be understood, only honored.